the whole problem with the Sri Lankan constitutions have been that they are unitary in character. And say, unlike other unitary states, in Sri Lanka, the way in which the judiciary has interpreted the unitary character is very unique. It is extremely a narrow interpretation that is completely opposed to the notion of devolution or power sharing. And it has been linked with the notion that Sri Lanka is essentially a Sinhala Buddhist state, and that this island and the Sinhalese people, being the chosen people, are to in fact protect Buddhism in its purest form. So when that is the sort of when that is the sort of background on which the state structure is modeled, then obviously all aspects of that state is going to give the interpretation such that Sri Lanka only belongs to the Sinhalese Buddhists, and it is not meant to be shared by anybody else, and all else or whoever else essentially live at the mercy of the Sinhalese Buddhists. So that interpretation has actually found very strong ground in Sri Lanka's jurisprudence with regards to unitary state. So the 13th Amendment falls well within the concept of the unitary state. In fact, when the 13th Amendment was brought as a bill, just before it was tabled in Parliament and debated and eventually passed, the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, all 9 judges of the Supreme Court, gave an opinion whereby 5 of the judges, which is the majority, including the Chief Justice at the time, very clearly went into detail in describing how the unitary character of the state has not been breached by the 13th Amendment, and how the 13th Amendment, even though it purports to devolve power or gives the appearance of a devolving power, in fact does not do so, because all the powers that are meant to be vested in the provincial council in fact vest with the governor, and with if it's a committee or if it's a commission, where the majority of the members of the commission are in fact appointed by the central government in Colombo. So in every way, the 13th Amendment essentially is Colombo's rule through the governor in the province. So that, ever since the 13th Amendment was passed in 1934, 34 years ago, the Tamils have rejected it in toto. In fact, the political party, the main political party that had a resounding mandate in 77, the TULF at that time, wrote to the Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi on the 28th of October 1987, when the 13th Amendment to the Constitution and the Provincial Council Bill, these 2 acts or in the form of bills, had been tabled in Parliament. They in fact wrote to Rajiv Gandhi at a time when India was sort of brokering or trying to broker some sort of political settlement, saying that that India must intervene and stop the 13th Amendment from being passed in Parliament. And the Provincial Council's bill must also be stopped, because it didn't come anywhere close to addressing Tamil concerns, given the sort of losses that had taken place at that time. So if you are saying not to pass the legislation because it is so poor and it's such a letdown, what that effectively means is that it was not even considered a starting point. And 34 years later, for those same people, Mr. Sambandhan was one of the signatories as the vice president of the TULF when they wrote to Rajiv Gandhi then, to have those same individuals headed by one of those signatories doing a complete U-turn and asking that it be implemented. I mean, if you ask for it to be implemented, means that you have accepted it. If you are in fact not prepared to consider it a starting point, it doesn't matter whether the 13th Amendment exists or not. So to in fact say that they want it implemented very clearly shows that there is this danger of these Tamil parties that are aligned with India very closely have in fact settled for the 13th Amendment as the basis for a solution to Sri Lanka. In fact, we left the TNA some 12 years ago in 2010, precisely because the TNA leadership at that time, on India's command, accepted the 13th Amendment as the basis for a solution. They did not say it out loud. We, of course, were privy to what was going on within the party. So we left. We came out of the party, and we have been telling for the last 12 years that the TNA is all about the 13th Amendment, and when the opportune time arises, they will in fact accept it. And that's what's happening now. Because you see, the fact that despite after 13 years since the war ended, the international community, particularly the West and India, have to pay lip service to finding a solution to the ethnic conflict is precisely because ever since the British left Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka claims independence, all three constitutions of quote-unquote independent Sri Lanka were rejected by the Tamils. The Salisbury Constitution, at that time, the predominant party was the All Ceylon Tamil Congress. In 1948, in fact, the first election after the Salisbury Constitution was promulgated, the Tamil Congress, which was the predominant Tamil party and the only Tamil party at that time, went before the people asking them to vote for them, which will be a vote to reject the Salisbury Constitution. And in fact, the Tamil Congress won overwhelmingly in the north and east. The same happened in 1972 in the first Republican Constitution, again, because it was a unitary constitution, was rejected by the Tamil people. At that time, the foremost party was the Federal Party, or the Ilangai Tamilarasu Katchi, as it's officially known, who called to reject it. Again in 1978, when the second Republican Constitution was also promulgated, the Tamils were left out. We very clearly did not take part in the participation of in the making of it, because the request to consider a federal arrangement was rejected immediately. So, because the Tamils have never been a party to the formation of the constitutions in this country, there is this claim that when the constitution being the supreme law of the country, the foremost law of your country, and when a section of that, when a very important, if not the second most significant section of the population of that country reject or have been excluded in formulating those constitutions, very clearly there is an ethnic conflict. So the fact that you have the Rajapaksas and all the Sinhala Buddhist nationalist parties, working overdrive to make out that there was only a terrorist problem in Sri Lanka, and that was sorted out some 12 years ago, and that all is honky-dory now. But despite that, the fact that these countries that respect the rule of law, at least in their own countries, have to pay lip service to having to find a solution, shows that Tamils taking part in the constitution making process and actually supporting it is fundamental and crucial to close the chapter on the ethnic conflict. Now, the moment you say the 13th Amendment after 34 years is in fact a starting point, where the Rajapaksas have said very clearly soon after the war that the 13th Amendment is going to be the basis for a solution. The chief opposition party leader, Sajith Premadasa, has said that the 13th Amendment is the basis for a solution. The JVP, after opposing it initially because of India's intervention, have accepted the 13th Amendment as a basis. The most ardent singular nationalist in opposition, Champika Ranawaka, who has ambitions of being a presidential candidate at the next presidential elections, recently as last week, said that the 13th Amendment and the provincial councils are the basis for a solution. So when the whole world, India is saying that the 13th Amendment is a solution. So when the whole world basically is saying that we have to accept the 13th Amendment as the basis for a solution, for the Tamils who have rejected it from the very inception 34 years ago and have consistently refused to accept it, for these parties and for whoever else in the diaspora or even here, to say that it is a starting point, despite the fact that they don't have a mandate for it. At every election, the 13th Amendment was not even spoken about. It was federalism, and it was a complete rejection of the unitary state. The danger is that you consider it the starting point, and when Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who's going to bring a new constitution at the end of this month, includes the provisions of the 13th Amendment, the Tamils in parliament, a majority, will support it. And there is a danger that the singular Buddhist nationalist agenda would very conveniently be fulfilled the moment the moment a majority of the Tamil parliamentarians represent the Northeast support that new constitution, because for the first time in history, you will have a constitution that has come into effect with the Tamils consenting, and it will effectively be a conflict transformation process where no longer is there going to be an ethnic conflict. Whatever happens thereafter, or whatever the Tamils scream about thereafter, saying, oh, well, we never really accepted the 13th Amendment as a solution. It was just a starting point. You can say whatever you want. But the constitution of the country has been passed for the first time with the full support of majority of this Tamil parliamentarians supporting it. The reason why the world considered that there was an ethnic conflict, which is that the Tamils had rejected the constitutions in the past, no longer that situation no longer exists. And therefore, it is very convenient for these countries to just close that chapter. And whatever positions that these countries thereafter take is not going to be on the basis of Tamils fighting for their rights, because their right has been addressed through the Sri Lankan constitution. So it will be whatever that happens thereafter, essentially, from our sort of perspective, will be based on purely geopolitics. The Tamils will just have to completely be at the mercy of major powers and their geopolitical ambitions. Foremost, our position has always been that there is a genocide taking place, and that genocide is not just. I mean, obviously, lives were deliberately destroyed during the war. But the genocide is something that is slightly bigger than that. It is the systematic dismantling of the existence of the Tamils as a nation. We have our own language, we have our own traditional homeland in the Northeast, we have our own culture, and then you also have the Tamils being able to, sustain an economic situation that allows them to exist as a collective. So all of these conditions, give you the position of nationhood, and for as long as we on the ground exist as a nation, then there is always the possibility of sometime in the future that nation in fact being recognized. So singular Buddhist nationalism's entire attitude has been to dismantle those four pillars that give us that qualification for nation. Now, so if the fact that the Tamils being a nation is what is the problem, and it is in fact that nation that is being destroyed, that nationhood that is being destroyed, then obviously it is the recognition of Tamil nationhood that can be the only solution. And our belief is that for a distinct nation to live with another nation within one country, it has to be a federal arrangement. Now, there is also legitimacy with this argument. In fact, there is far more legitimacy today than maybe, say, 1951, when the ITAK first, in their first national convention, passed their very first resolution, which said that the Tamils are a nation. I think there is far more credibility with regards to saying that, we need a federal arrangement that recognizes a plurinational Sri Lanka, where the Tamil nationhood is also recognized. Is that during the war, the international community sort of tried to blame the LTT, saying that they backtracked on federalism. So their accusation was that the LTT was a party that could not be worked with because in their own view, they felt that the LTT was not committed to a federal arrangement. And they felt that the LTT was only interested in a separate state. And therefore, the LTT was not a party to that could be worked with. So that was a major justification that was given to us when we were parliamentarians at that time, when we were lobbying these countries, that the LTT could not be worked with. Well, today, there is no LTT. There is no LTT, and every single, at least over 90% of the Tamil people who voted at the last elections and at previous elections have voted for a mandate to recognize the Northeast as a Tamil nation and for a federal arrangement. So our view is that a federal arrangement is something that cannot be compromised. The recognition of Tamil nationhood is something that cannot be compromised. If the worry, let's say, coming from the Sinhala Buddhists, if their justification for trying to reject the notion of federalism is that there is possibilities for it leading to secession, well, those are things that can be considered within the constitution itself. And an argument, whenever this is put forward, whenever this argument that federalism can be a stepping stone to secession, well, you had your unitary state for the last 74 years, and you had one of the strongest separatist armed struggles and almost succeeding. If you had not committed genocide, certainly that struggle would have succeeded, and you had your unitary state all the way through. So, I mean, all of these arguments go out of the window. If we really go to sit and have a debate, and I don't see any reason why federalism should not be considered. And I think the Tamil parties, the rest of the Tamil parties, if they are honest and in fact refuse to consider anything short of a federal arrangement that recognizes Tamil nationhood, then that would be the starting point. Well, the goal is to hold these people to account. The goal is to say that the mandate was in fact for the recognition of Tamil nationhood and a federal arrangement that allows the Tamil nation to enjoy the right to self-determination without dividing the country. So that is the mandate that all the parties here actually got when they went before the people. That these people who are now asking for the 13th Amendment to be implemented, when they have absolutely no mandate to do it, and in fact that mandate, since they rejected the unitary state at every elections, is in fact completely opposed to what they are asking, that we need the people to get behind their mandate and in fact make it quite clear that those who they had voted for are in breach of their mandate. So that is essentially what we are asking, because we can. It doesn't seem like there's going to be an election anytime soon. So there is no way of sort of holding these other parties that are defaulting from their mandates to account. They very clearly are working to to a sort of written prescription coming from Delhi. So it means that it is only by way of the people getting involved, who are the actual mandate holders, who can actually prevent this disaster from happening. So that is essentially creating awareness of the dangers involved with the TNA and Mr. Vignesan's group supporting the new constitution that is to come if the 13th Amendment provisions are in fact included in that constitution. And look, I mean, everyone in the government ranks have said that they are for the 13th Amendment. Not a single responsible senior member has rejected the 13th Amendment. The President and the Prime Minister have, in fact, the Prime Minister has repeatedly acknowledged that the 13th Amendment is fundamental. The President at no point has rejected it, right? So if under these circumstances, if the 13th Amendment provisions are in fact included in the fourth Constitution, which is almost certain to happen, then these parties must be prevented, because the government does not want to have a referendum. I mean, if it goes before the people, then we can ask the people, the Tamil people in the Northeast, to directly oppose the Constitution, the fourth Constitution that is to be brought. But the government does not want to go before the people, because the government's position is that the previous Constitution, the present Constitution, came into being with just purely a 2/3 majority being passed in Parliament. Even under the provisions of this present Constitution, except for changing certain fundamental articles within the Constitution, that is that Sri Lanka is a unitary state, Sri Lanka is a single abolitionism shall be given foremost position with regards to franchise and a few others. All other changes can happen with a simple 2/3 majority. So the government is not prepared to change any of those fundamental articles of the present Constitution when they bring the new Constitution. So the argument is that, well, a simple 2/3 majority in Parliament will do. They already have the 2/3 majority, which means that if the government tables the Constitution tomorrow and decides to debate it for, let's say, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long they want, regardless of what is said, no matter what sense people talk against this fourth Constitution, at the end of the day, if they have the numbers, they're passing. And the danger here is then it is left to only the 18 members of Parliament representing the Tamils in the Northeast. The question is, how are they going to vote? Because whether the Tamils accept a unitary constitution for the first time or not depends on whether 10 out of those 18 Tamil parliamentarians, how 10 members vote, at least 10 members vote. Already you have 5 members who sit with the government, so they are almost certainly going to support the unitary constitution, and they are the biggest sort of supporters of the 13th Amendment already. Within the TNA, you have the TELO, which has 3. You have the plot, and then you have Vignesaran, who have already come out very strongly saying that they are for the 13th Amendment, accepting it as a starting point, which means that if those provisions are included in the new constitution, they will support it. The ITAK members have 6 members, but they are too divided. So even if we say at present the ITAK 6 members decide that they are not going to support it, already you have 10 members who are willing to support it. So that is the sort of very dangerous numbers game that we are faced with, and it is for these reasons that we believe that there is a sense of urgency in making the people aware and getting them to oppose it. Let me answer the question this way. Let me say how our party looks at India, because I think that will clear the air with regards to what our position is with regards to it. India has all along voiced certain concerns with regards to who has a say within Sri Lanka, who in the sense of outsiders. In 87, it was the US in a Cold War scenario where India was very much, aligned with the Soviet Union, and they were extremely worried that the US was, trying to get some sort of strategic footprint within Sri Lanka. So that was primarily the background for the Indo-Lanka Accord. Currently, it is China, and they've been very open with us with regards to how they view the present situation. Now, as far as we are concerned, we as in the TNPF have always stated that we don't want a geopolitical battleground being made of the Tamil homeland. So our view has always been that once we welcome everyone and once we want to be friends with everyone, certainly if someone's presence here is going to have some geopolitical implications with regards to national security for India, then we don't want that. We don't want such a presence here, right? So that is a unilateral position that the TNPF takes. The TNPF also says that we will not, although we really have some serious issues with regards to the Indo-Lanka Accord when it comes to the Indo-Lanka Accord provisions being seen as the solution to the Tamil ethnic conflict. We have some serious reservations with regards to that. But the accord also consists of annexures, which addresses India's national security concerns. And we have always maintained that purely because of India's national security concerns being addressed through the accord, we will not reject the accord, right? So that is with regards to, and that is a unilateral position that the TNPF takes. And that is with regards to how we look at India's concerns and India's interests, in the region. But at the same time, we are very clear that India cannot prescribe solutions. And India certainly cannot prescribe solutions that in fact are not solutions to the Tamil nation here. And the people who best can prescribe a solution to the ethnic conflict are the victims themselves. Because it is they who have to feel secure. It is not for anyone else to say that this will make you feel secure. They can give their advice, that's fine. But no one should be telling the Tamil people after the genocide that we faced in particular, what we should accept and what we should not. So the Tamil people have been consistent for the last 74 years. They reject the unitary constitution. They have said that they want Tamil nationhood recognized and that they will settle for a federal solution. They have said it consistently and very strongly, almost unanimous mandates being given right through. Those wishes of the Tamil people at this stage must be recognized. After all, the whole world justified a war against the LTTE when the Tamils considered the LTTE their liberators, justified the war against the LTTE on the premise that the LTTE refused to accept federalism as a solution. Well, Tamils are saying federalism today. So India must recognize that, must accept that. And any sort of refusal to do that must be opposed. And if that is being portrayed as we being anti-Indian or the Tamils being anti-Indian, then so be it. But that is not in fact the case. We are not anti-Indian. We are not anti-anybody. If at all we don't, if there is some country that we don't want having a presence, it is in fact because of India's national security interests. So I think India must play its part. I think India must come and meet us at that halfway point. We've done enough to be quite categorical with regards to on whose side we are when it comes to national security concerns of India. it's a nuanced position. The other thing is that the Indo-Lanka Accord was actually, it is the Indo-Lanka Accord that India actually is interested in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our position is that the 13th Amendment and the Indo-Lanka Accord are two separate things. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution is a unilaterally Sri Lankan document, right? So it is JR who created the 13th Amendment unilaterally, and that was merely his government's interpretation of the implementation of the accord, right? So there are two different things. You can look at the accord and the solution part of the accord, the ethnic conflict. You can look at the provisions of the accord, and you can come up with a completely different document that is purporting to address the Indo-Lanka Accord, right? So legally, our view is that there are two separate documents, and rejecting the Tamils and India rejecting the 13th Amendment does not allow Sri Lanka to reject the accord.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that is the argument that we make. In fact, there is enough of documentation to suggest that the Indian government was in fact not shown the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the last version of it, before it was tabled in Parliament. The TULF in its letter on the 28th of October, 87, in fact, says so. Says that India was never shown it because India promised to share it with the Tamil parties. Jayabodna promised to share it. Jayabodna also didn't. India also said that it was not aware. So legally, I think we can make that point that we oppose the 13th Amendment without any danger to the accord being Sri Lanka using our rejection of the 13th Amendment to in fact tell, well, the accord also then has to be thrown out of the window.